and we'll get this started. And before we begin further, I'd just like to acknowledge I'm hosting here from Ottawa, the Ottawa Valley. This is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and the Anishinaabe people, and we're grateful for this beautiful land that we get to share. I'm going to turn it over to Remy now, Remy Rodden, who's going to be the facilitator for this session.
Thanks a lot, Jason. And just to be clear, this is the presentation here is Creating a Waste-Free Tomorrow, how the U of T trash team brings waste literacy into the classroom. So if that's not what you're signed up for, you can leave right now. No judgment, it's okay. So Remy, I am currently on the traditional territory of the White River First Nation, which is a very small First Nation on the frontiers of Canada, the edge, the margins in Beaver Creek, Yukon, Canada's most westerly community. We're very pleased to be facilitating today, and our two guests are Susan Debreceni and Rafaela Gutierrez. Hope I have that right. And Susan is passionate about connecting individuals with meaningful opportunities, spent 10.5 years supporting a national volunteer with the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, delivering public presentations to a varied audience and educational workshops to elementary students. She now leads the development of outreach programming with the University of Toronto trash team. And Rafaela is a social scientist who over the past decade has used multi approaches to evaluate social challenges. In Brazil, she worked on projects to empower communities suffering from economic and social disadvantages. Now in Toronto, she evaluates a food waste campaign and is developing an assessment program with the U of T trash team. And Rafaela, you didn't remember what you put in your bio, is that accurate?
Yeah. Well, so I'm the project lead educational. I lead the educational program from the U of T trash team. But yes, that's almost correctly. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Excellent. Well, welcome everybody to the session today. I see we have a fairly small group, which is great. Maybe ask you to just mute your microphones right now, but I suspect we'll be able to jump in because it is a small group. If you have questions, our presenters said they were okay with questions along the way, so those could go in the chat, or if it seems appropriate, you could jump in with a question live. So without further ado, let's go ahead. Who's starting off?
I'm starting, but Rafaela will just put the slides up and then we'll get going. So, but as we get the slides up, I just want to say we're going to be sharing more about our science-based outreach group, the University of Toronto trash team, with a bit of background of who we are, and then focusing in specifically on why we're here today to talk more about our classroom programs with grade 5. So a little bit more about ourselves. I'm Susan, and I lead our volunteer engagement and community programs for the team, and joined by Rafaela, who is with social science and educational programs. We just can go to the next slide. Yeah, so here we are, and here are all of our contact details and a little bit more fun information about ourselves. And we helped together, along with another, co-found our team back in 2017. And we did also wish to share a land acknowledgement for the territory where we operate, which is speaking to the land on which the University of Toronto operates. And as you can see and are hopefully familiar with as well from all the lovely presentations today, it's been the traditional land for years of the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and most recently Mississaugas of the Credit. And today the meeting place is still home to the many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. And we're so grateful to have the opportunity to work here, and also encourage those of you outside of Toronto to acknowledge the properties where you are working as well. So more about our team. I mentioned we're formed back in 2017. And it's, while Rafaela and I work full-time, we are primarily volunteer-based, students and early career researchers, all working towards a shared goal to increase waste literacy in our community and reduce plastic pollution in our ecosystems. And before we get into the school programs, a little bit more about the 3 main areas that we work, and that is community outreach, education, and solutions-based research. So community outreach, as you can see, some things you might assume things like cleanups, programs, presentations, a lot of them online this past year and a bit, our education programs, which I'll come back to, and our solutions-based research, where we're looking at research that can also inform solutions to the issue of plastic pollution. And I will say on both of these, the community outreach and solutions research, we try to integrate these into our education programs wherever possible. So I'll touch a little bit about how our school program idea came to be. Since we're still a fairly new team back in 2017, we actually formed with a different goal in mind. If you're not familiar with that picture on the lower left, that's Mr. Trash Wheel, who was our inspiration in Baltimore Harbor. You can kind of see some booms in the water that are floating, and it feeds litter up a conveyor belt into a dumpster at the back. So it's a really great tool to remove pollution from the water. But as you can see, it was given a quirky personality, and that's what appealed to us, where it blended this great platform for outreach, but actually having tangible solutions. So we thought we could bring one to the city of Toronto, which is still, to be quite honest, a long-term goal. We do hope to make this some kind of reality. But in the meantime, our team has shifted towards more of outreach programming, where things like trash wheels and other technology can be incorporated. So when we met as a group, obviously education and waste literacy are very core goals. So it was a natural fit to look at what we can do in the classroom with the expertise that we bring. And I'll go into the process of this in a second. And this is kind of to mimic the process we went to get to our lesson plans. We'll put this code you can go to directly, or if you type the codes at menti.com, I'll share my screen. That'll be on the next screen as well. And we're just going to generate a word cloud with the question, when you just hear the word plastic, what are the types of things you want to learn about? So as you type your answers, we'll see if what you're thinking is hopefully what we've put together with our lesson plans. So you can just, with your phone or opening up another browser window, if you just go to menti.com, you can put in that 8-digit 49802124. I'll just give everyone a moment or two. You should be seeing that on your screens. Okay. Well, it looks like everyone's finding this all right, and Rafaela has also put the direct link in the chat too. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of words about sources, microplastics, some keywords about reduction and recycling, sources and impacts. Will it ever break down? Okay. So these are great, and a lot of these come up within our lesson. So I'll let this go for about 10 more seconds so we can get into each of the activities. But it is nice to see a lot of overlap with what we're going to share for the remainder of the presentation. Okay, great. So we can put the slides back up now, Rafaela, and then I'll continue on with a behind the scenes look at how we created the lesson plans that we'll share with you.
Can you see it?
Yep, you just need to go to the next slide.
Okay, sorry.
Great. So this is actually our very rough brainstorm notes from our early meetings. We met with a smaller group of volunteers within our team. All of them were associated with the Rockman Lab, which is part of the department that we're associated with, all actively studying plastics and microplastics, which was in that word cloud, in aquatic ecosystems. And we tried to think about what are some things that we know about that we think we could develop lessons around. And that's really what makes our programming unique, is that it was a result of co-creation and really bringing some relevant expertise and relevant and timely information on actual research that's ongoing and information that we know now that we can bring into the classroom. So what this has ultimately developed are 4 lesson plans, which are still very similar to the titles. And I'll turn it over to Rafaela now. She'll go a little bit more in depth about the goals behind our program, and then we'll actually get into some of the lessons.
Thank you, Susan. So our school program, it's based on these 4 approaches. In all lessons, we discuss a variety of solutions to plastic pollution, and they were designed to empower students in a fun, positive, and inclusive tone. And this is really important, is the trash team philosophy. We always use the positive approach to discuss waste. And we also foster inquiry-based learning. And finally, we use a peer-to-peer teaching model where the lessons are facilitated in the elementary classroom by our undergraduate and graduate students who become mentors to these elementary students, opening their eyes to career options available in STEM. So our school program work with grade 5 students from the Toronto District School Board and Toronto Catholic District School Board, with priority given to the Model Schools for Inner Cities program. This program was created by TDSB to increase access and opportunities for all students. We designed our program to be free, so all schools can have access to it, especially the model schools. Before I get to the lessons, it's important to quickly provide some feedbacks about the process of adapting to a new classroom dynamic during COVID. Because elementary students cannot share any materials, everything that was created for them to play independently. So here you can see examples of board games and worksheets for each student, as well as our volunteer team in action, leading one of the activities on the diversity of plastics. So we created 4 lessons designed to stand alone or be taught sequentially with 4 separate classroom visits. They cover, all the lessons cover plastic cycle, watersheds and their relationship to litter, impacts of plastics on ecosystems, solutions to plastic pollution. They each included 3 to 4 interactive activities ranging from board games, experiments, trivia, and more. All lessons are based on global competencies and aim to prepare the next generation for the 21st century. And matter, energy, and sustainability are some of the fundamental concepts connected with the Ontario curriculum. So let's see each of the lessons and the volunteers who have helped create them. Our first lesson is the plastic cycle. So in this lesson, we will introduce students to the plastic cycle. So how plastic is made, how it's used, and where it goes when we throw it away. And we introduce the concept of linear and circular economy. So students are shown local tools available to help correctly identify how to dispose of common waste items, and then taken through an activity to identify sustainable alternatives to single-use plastics. So the first activity I want to show here illustrated 4 major steps on how plastic is made. During the lesson, we explore each of these steps with slowly, and then students will need to put those steps in order. So now I would like to invite you all to participate in this very short version of the activity. First, we will discuss with the students where they think plastic comes from and what is the first step among these 4. So please type in the chat, what do you think is the first step? I will give you 10 seconds. It's plastic products, so pellets, raw materials, oil. Yes, sure. Yes, plastic comes from raw materials or natural resource that we find in the environment. The most common raw material is crude oil. And do you have a guess for the second one? Please type in the chat. Yep. We will present to the students that the crude oil needs to go through a number of chemical processes to become plastic. And then we have the third steps that is, can I have one person or anyone who wants to share the third step? Yep. Okay, factor, yes. Then we will present how the pellets will be transformed into the preform. That means what the bottle looks like before its final shape. And then, of course, the last step is the final product that you can find it in the stores. So after they gone through all the steps of the plastic cycle, they will learn what will happen with the water bottle after they use it. So for this activity, we will use local tools to identify how to dispose waste. Here in Toronto, we have the Waste Wizard, that is an app that help us to find out where items go when we can no longer use them. Using the worksheet that we provide to the students, so we send the worksheet to them, they will match each item with the bin they think is the correct one. So if you want to check the website, I think the link is in the chat, but before you check the Waste Wizard, I would like to ask you to type in the chat, which bin do you think the plastic, I'm asking here 3 items. First, the plastic grocery bag. Where do you think the plastic grocery bag goes? Garbage, compost, recycling? Okay, recycling. Okay, and now what about the cheap bag? Where do you think the cheap bag goes? Trash, garbage, okay, oh, okay. And finally, the black plastic bag. Trash, blue, garbage. Yes, that's the tricky one. So of course, the regular plastic bag goes to the blue bin here in Toronto, and they give some tips how to properly put in the garbage, so you can put the handles closed and instead the bag being loose. And for potato chip bag, the potato chip bag is made of mixed material, layers of because they have layers of propylene plastic, polyethylene plastic, and aluminum that cannot be recycled, that goes to the garbage. And that's a very tricky one. You might be wondering why in the city of Toronto you can't recycle the plastic, the black plastic bag, but you can recycle the other colors of bags. It's because the optical sorting equipment that can't locate black plastic, so the machine doesn't work for black plastic, and also the market for black plastic is really small. So we discussed how important it is to, we discussed with the kids how important it is to check your local authorities to know where to dispose your items, avoiding waste contamination. And then we have a discussion about the difference between circular and linear economy. And after that, they have a trivia and a lot of other games. And now I will turn it back to Susan, who will present the lesson 2.
And the next lesson, once they've learned about how plastic is made and talked a little bit more about litter in the environment, we talk about watersheds and introduce them to how watersheds and litter interact. And that, of course, starts with an introduction to what a watershed is and the notion that everything is connected. Even if you don't see water, it all flows down into that central point. And then we explore some of the different sources of pollution within a watershed before then examining the physical characteristics and having a little bit of an activity based on hypothesis of how items might travel and move within a watershed. And so on our next slide, I'll go just to show you something that we help after we discuss what a watershed is. Again, because we're focused in Toronto, we've used a bit of a place-based approach. So we begin an introduction by localizing them to their own watershed. This is an interactive map that the Toronto Region Conservation Authority has. If there's a similar one where you are, it's a really great tool because on the website link, which is on this slide, you can go there at any time and you can zoom in. And so we encourage the students to think about where their school is and try to, put the pieces together by thinking of where's the closest water body to their school as they're going to school. When they are going to school, what are some connections to the water system that they note? And then through that, we help them locate their watershed based on the legend of this map. So this is a zoomed out version, but you can zoom in and out and move the map around and even find like key landmarks in your community to help you even become more familiar. So I'm going to go on to one of our activities about the sources of pollution or pollutants in the watershed. And we've identified 7. There's certainly more than 7, but we chose ones that we felt had a really interesting story connection back to plastic. So the 7 marked here by the yellow arrows are industry, residential, and commercial, wastewater treatment plant at the bottom here, a landfill, road, and the lake. And these are all different areas that we ask them to envision. This is a a make-believe version of a watershed that looks a lot like the city of Toronto, but of course you could apply this approach to most any other community as well. We'll have these common areas. So this is the game board that they have, and these are the game pieces, each representing the different pollutants that in this example are litter on the front side. But we also like to go that next step to show them eventually, once they're in the watershed, the microplastics that they could eventually become. Someone in the word cloud talked about plastic breakdown, and it doesn't really ever disappear. It does just kind of break apart and degrade in the environment and become smaller and smaller. In some cases, like the fiber here, this is under a microscope, so very, very challenging to see with the naked eye. So using these pieces, they go back to the game board, and we'll play a few of them in a second, to try to match these pollutants to where they originate from in the watershed, so what source they're linked to. So for some of these pieces, of course, they could have multiple answers. So let's just play with a few. We'll start with the first one, which I think is rubber car tire. So if you could just type in the chat, which of these areas you think the car tire originates from in the watershed. And rubber is can be classified as a type of microplastic, which would be on the other side. So I see road, landfill. Okay, Rafaela, you can reveal the answer as everyone continues to type. Landfill is certainly possible, but road is a big source of this. And in fact, the friction from tires on the road can actually cause tire dust, which can enter the watershed. Okay, so good job, everyone, on that one. We're gonna go to clothing now. And we hear a lot about clothing and the microfibers they eventually become. So let's think of an area in this watershed that the clothing as sweaters and fibers could originate from. Okay, so the answer for this one was wastewater treatment plant. We showed you the answer before we got to the guesses, but that's all right. And that's also wastewater treatment plant. We do a lot of work studying the fibers that we find after things go in the wash. And our last one that we'll try, I think we just have one more, is cigarette butt. Now this one probably has a lot of answers. So before we move it, let's just type a few of the ones where you think cigarette butts might originate from. And people are not on here as a source, but of course there is certainly use of that. Okay, we can go ahead and show where the cigarette butt goes. In this case, we show commercial, but you could make a case for most anywhere else. And then last but not least, we'll do the pellets, which you might have remembered from the last activity when we talked about how plastic is made. So if you think about how plastic is made, where might you think that comes from? I'm kind of leading you to an answer here. And yes, that's correct, Lucia. Hope I got that right. From industry. Industry actually, not intentionally, but certainly can spill into the environment. And a good note here from Bruce, the opportunities for debate. And actually at this point, we ask the students who had a different answer, and we discuss and think about why they had different answers, but also not celebrate the litter is all over, but it's a really good thing to note that it's not just one source. It really is important to understand that full watershed context. Okay, so move on to the last activity of this lesson, which is our float, sink, or suspend activity to talk about how it travels. We start with just a basic introduction to the water column, water surface, and sediment, and then we take them to a game where we introduce 3 movements, and for each, we'll present some objects, and for each object, we'll ask them to think about if it's gonna float at the water surface, if it's gonna sink to the bottom, or if it's gonna float, we would do a backstroke. So I'll try to do a backstroke from a chair, sink down to the bottom, they would make a fun dance move, or suspend, just kind of like a jellyfish floating around. So we have a video where we have these things featured here are in the video. And at this stage, we can introduce the hypothesis because they think of what's their hypothesis of what will happen to each object in water. So we'll play a snippet from the video. And I encourage you, even if your screens are off, it's a good chance for you to get up and stretch as you guess your answer. We won't force you, you're all adults, you can do whatever you like, but let's just do a few of these to see what might happen. Okay, so Rafaela's just gonna play. And Rafaela created this amazing video to go with the activity that you'll see what I'm talking about much clearer once it's in this format. So in this case, they're presented with a straw. We have a time for them to think of their hypothesis. Will it float? Will it sink? Or will it suspend? So as we have the straw here, they'd be making their observations down. So now at this point, the straw looks like it might be suspended. Okay, it's suspended, and you know what? This one actually floats. And then at this point, the answer would be revealed as float. And this is all timed to work within the lesson as well. So there we go, and then it comes to show the correct answer. and moves on to the next item. And well, we might have some fun playing with all of them. I think this is a good chance now to go on to our third lesson, so you can experience a little bit more about our programs and have time for some questions. Thanks, Rafaela.
Thank you, Susan. So our third lesson takes a look at the impact of plastic on ecosystems. It helps students understand the main ways plastic can impact living organisms, especially in freshwater ecosystems. Students participate in activities to understand the impacts of entanglement and plastic ingestion on wildlife, with a focus on animals found in the Great Lakes. They also learn the steps to plan and conduct an experiment. So they will form hypotheses, they test their hypotheses, they collect data and interpret results. So we will start the lesson discussing what an ecosystem is, and we take one holistic approach by discussing plastic and wildlife. We will take a journey. So then we'll take a journey with the students, and we will visit 4 different ecosystems. We'll talk about how plastic can affect plants and animals in each ecosystem, and we'll meet more scientists from the University of Toronto who are studying these ecosystems. We also have 4 animals here on the right side of your screen: an Arctic fox, a jellyfish, a raccoon, and a grizzly bear with the fish in its mouth. And we will ask the students to return then to their own ecosystems. So our journey begins in a stream ecosystem. In the stream ecosystems, we are featuring one of our UFT Trash team members, the scientist Rachel. Rachel studies the impact of plastic on ecosystems in running waters, and then we will bring the bear back to their home. So our journey continues to a deep sea ecosystem, and we will discuss how they think plastics gather. And we will present Clara, that's one of our scientists in our group, and they will guess which animals belong in the deep sea ecosystem, which is the bioluminescent jellyfish who light up to attract food or mates and for protection. And then we continue to the far north and far south to the ends of the earth to talk about polar ecosystems. And we have Bonnie, one of our scientists, who goes there and studies microplastics. And we bring our fox to her home. Oh, not her, its homes. Sorry. And the last stop on our journey, we are staying close to our home. It's a urban ecosystem, and we discuss how we, community scientists, how we can help study plastic in the urban ecosystem and how we can help with cleanups, for example. So then, in our next activity, we are going to make and test a hypothesis to help students to learn about wildlife entanglement. But first, we will discuss what a hypothesis is, and we will illustrate it with a very simple example. So let's do it together. So for example, if I made a hypothesis that all people in this meeting today can raise one eyebrow, how would I test it? So I would ask everyone to try to raise one eyebrow, and then I would observe if everyone could do it. So let's do it together. Oh, I can see some. No, Susan. Oh, I can see people doing it. Yeah, if you don't want to show in your video, you can type if you can or not. Okay, let me see it. So okay, I can see people who cannot do it. Susan cannot do it. I cannot do it, but I'm not in the experiment because I am the researcher. So, okay, a lot of people can do it, but not a lot of them. So that was a good hypothesis, but my hypothesis was wrong. Okay, so a good hypothesis is really something that you can actually test, like asking us to all raise our eyebrows. But what if my hypothesis was that all aliens can raise their eyebrows? Is it a good hypothesis? I don't think so, because we don't know, we don't have any way to test if aliens can raise their eyebrows. We don't even know if they have eyebrows. So this means it's not a good hypothesis. So with this in mind, the students will make and test a hypothesis about how entanglement might impact a bird's ability to fly. So we will do a very quickly exercise with them. So they will think about a bird they wish they could be. I will be blue jays today. And they will pretend their hands are birds. So they will pretend that they are flying. Here are their wings. And they will fly freely all around. And then they will make observations. First, they will measure the wingspan distance. And the wingspan distance, it's how they could open their wings. So using the ruler that they have in the worksheet, I will use one here. They will measure the distance between their pink and their thumb. So that's the wingspan. And they will do some observations. Then they will imagine that one day they are enjoying a nice time flying around, but suddenly they become wrapped and tangled up in plastic. But before they actually entangle their plastics, they will create a testable hypothesis about how this entanglement might impact their wingspan. So they will create it. After they have their own hypothesis, now they will grab their rubber band that will pretend this is the plastics, and we will provide to them. And then they will entangle the bird. So they will entangle a bird like this. They will stick one thumb here through one side and then extend the rubber band around the back of their hand and stick the pink finger into the other side. So now they are entangled, the bird got entangled, and they will record, they will do the exercise again, and they will be recording quantitative, qualitative data for this experiment. So using the ruler again, they will measure and record their new wingspan and make some observations, how they feel, how it flies, how they open the wings and things like that. And then at the end, they will try to remove the rubber band without using the other hand. So I'm having here, you can do at home later, and they will try to remove the rubber band. This is kind of, this is how it might feel to be an animal that is entangled in plastic. Unlike wildlife, it's easier for us as humans to remove the elastics like this. So with these activities, we also want to build empathy. So in the last activity from this lesson that I want really quickly present today, they will explore plastic ingestion and food chain with a focus on wildlife in a freshwater ecosystem. So we will do a math activity to illustrate how microplastic move up the food chain from one level to the next one. So from the zooplankton to the minnows to a hungry salmon. So they will do a math exercise to get how microplastics move up. And we will finish the activity talking about what they think might happen if humans eat fish that have ingested plastic. So now I will pass to Susan to present the last lesson.
Right, so our last lesson focuses on solutions, of course. While we do have an entire lesson devoted to it, we do make sure that each of the previous three have elements of this, especially during this discussion where students try to think of actions that they can take themselves or encourage others to do. But in this lesson, what's really cool is that we take them through this solutions hierarchy, which I'll explain very shortly. And then once they've learned this, we go into the different levels and groups and how they can all be involved. But the core of this lesson is we're actually taking them through a design activity to come up with their very own solution designed for plastic pollution, some type of local solution that they can implement for something of concern. Before we move on, though, I'll put a link in the chat. So the solutions hierarchy is this, as you can see, it's a hierarchy of steps to take, from the top that are best all the way to the kind of less ideal, but still have a value to rank and categorize steps we can take to lessen the chance of litter and other items from reaching landfill, because the ultimate goal is to not end up in a landfill, because once it's there for a very, very long time. So we also have a video version of this hierarchy where we go through step by step that our team members have learned how to do animation and video creation, and that's what I put in the chat. So you can watch that video that we share in the class as well. It's about 6 minutes long. So I'll take you into the lesson activities, which that's all right. We start first, though, by just grounding them with some bigger context, with some real data. So this is some data from shoreline cleanups that have taken place along the Great Lakes in the past. And so we had this metric where we compare it to CN Towers because we're in Toronto. This is a very noted landmark, but of course you can apply this logic to anywhere you are taking some kind of metric and comparing it to something that the students are familiar with and makes them think more about. So once they kind of had the scale of the issue of litter, we then present them with some scenarios that they can design their solution around. So I'll go to show that slide. I think that's the next one. Great. So we break them into small groups depending on the classroom setup. So, they can work on their own, but if they're able to be in groups, that's great because they can bounce ideas off of each other. And while it's very open-ended, we want to inspire their creativity. We do want to give them a bit of direction. So we do start with some very general types of scenarios they could pick that they feel very close to, that they want to design a solution for. So whether that's litter in the community on land and parks, litter in water in the lakes, creeks, rivers, or ocean, or if there's something else that they're already super passionate about, they can go with that scenario. We then go into a little bit of inspiration about the types of things that solutions can be. A solution can be an invention. A solution can be an art campaign. It can be something we haven't even thought of, and we will hear from them towards the latter part of the class. So after they've got a little bit of inspiration, they get into their groups, and I'll just show you not the whole worksheet, but just some of the first few questions to give you an idea of the level that we're going into with them. After they've had some time as a group to meet, they're encouraged to think of what's the concern that they're designing around. What is the name for their solution? And we've had some pretty creative ones already shared in our past visits. And then a short description of how it works, what it does, and where it takes place. And at that point, they may not have the fully fledged solution yet at this point. Some of them get really far and some of them are still thinking. So we take a pause and come back as a classroom to talk about the role that different groups have when it comes to solutions. So we talk about the role that an individual like them can play, how groups of individuals in the community can come together, companies and government, but not just how each of these groups, what their independent role is, but how they can intersect and overlap. And they come back to their worksheet with this knowledge and start to apply these groups into their own solution to think about, okay, maybe this is now something I want to bring to life. How can I involve these other groups in my solution? And what strategies would I take to reach out to them? So it's a lot of, independent work and discussion, and then coming back as a group. Once we've heard from them, they hear a little bit more about us, about some solutions that already exist. And in some cases, they have very similar ideas to what's already out there, but just a different spin on it. And it's nice to see, they can see that their ideas are validated by some other ideas that are already out there. And this is an example of when we've taken some of our active work that's currently ongoing and incorporated back to our lessons. Our team, in addition to our education programs, we are doing ongoing research with Ports Toronto with sea bins. So if you haven't heard of a sea bin, you can think of it as a floating trash bin. You can see it on the right here. It's attached to a dock. It goes up and down. It's kind of like a vacuum. It sucks in the water and any of the litter floats into the bin that you can see in the middle. You can just pull that out and then dump that litter off to where it needs to go. And that's Cassandra on our team on the very left, actually this past summer, and coming up this summer again, sorting through what was in the bin to actually categorize what was found. You can see some of that in the smaller images here. And Rafaela, who's also involved in that work, they found a lot of smaller plastics, which I'll show on the next slide. The top 10 items from last year's research season. And you can see it's a plethora mix of small fragments, microplastics, and some larger items as well. And this was just from a few sea bins. So we're very early stages with this program, but it's very great to see that it can collect things as small as microplastics that not just inform, we know what's in the bin, but it helps us think about what is in the water and where might it be coming from. And Rafaela is just about to play a video here, collecting some of the bigger items. And we like to play this because it's kind of fun. We didn't plant this. There was a balloon, probably someone's sixth birthday, and sucked right into the bin. I think we should have time. I see your question, Jason. We can, we have a whole trash trapping element to our work in terms of CBINs, and we can direct you to that project as well, because it's something that we're currently working on. Could have been a 9, yeah. Okay, so they all go, it goes right in. So that's the solutions lesson. We love all the lessons, but this is, they all go over really well. This one really is a great one to end on a super positive note, especially after learning about some of the potential impacts in the environment. They really kind of end feeling very empowered with all of the knowledge and steps that they can now take. And yeah, so I'll turn back to Rafaela for some wrap up of our other aspects.
Oh yeah, some said, Bruce said maybe it was a 9, yeah. It can be a 9 as well. Okay, thank you, Susan. In parallel with this, with the program, we are running a study to better understand the efficacy of our school program to increase waste literacy among grade 5 students. So broadly, our research questions are, does the waste literacy school program increase the understanding about the issue of plastic pollution? Does the waste literacy school program influence predictors of behavior change in students? Does our waste literacy school program stimulate teachers to incorporate aquatic litter or other environmental education into their future teaching? So to answer those questions, we will use a questionnaire to access the students' environmental knowledge, attitudes, communication, and self-reported behavior before and after participating in this program. So as part of the classroom activity, students will be giving a short paper questionnaire to access their understanding of the subject matter prior to the lesson plan. The same survey will then be administered in the classroom 2 months after the students participate in the school program. So it's a before and after survey. And here are some of the questions from the questionnaire. The questions were designed to capture change in behavior, environmental knowledge, communication, attitude, pre-existing concern for damage to the natural environment or benefits from personal action, and self-reported behavior change. This research is in the pilot phase, but we expect the findings of this study will contribute to understand how our school program can influence predictors of behavior change. So we are excited about these programs, and we have helped create them with a lot of support. So we would like to thank all the volunteers from the U of T Trash team who have helped create and lead our lessons, as well as the main funders from the program, Environmental and Climate Change Canada and NSERC Promo Science. So please visit our website for more details. If you get in touch or if you need anything from us, just send us a message. It's a pleasure to be here today. So thank you so much for your time. And I think I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Yeah, and if anyone missed the emails and wants, we can put it in the chat if you want to touch. I did see a question. I'm jumping in. Jason had asked about CBIN projects in Vancouver, which is a different project, not related to our schools, but overlapping. So I did put a link in there. I just couldn't remember, Rafaela. We had spoken with a group on the West Coast. Was that in Victoria?
It is in, we have one in Victoria. We have one in one city near, it's so difficult to pronounce, I don't know, but I can find the city later.
Yeah, and we say we're not running it, but we are helping them in terms of the ways that we categorize the litter. Yeah, great.
Okay.
Well, that was fabulous, Susan and Rafaela. Do we have any questions? I think you could probably just ask them directly rather than the chat, or if in the chat, if you're more familiar, more comfortable with that.
I'll just verbalize the thing I was said in the chat, which is thanks, guys, both of you, great presentation. Awesome starting points for questions for students to answer that start with where the answers start with it depends. I love the opportunity for students to make a choice, but then to back it up with why they chose it and have conversations about the relationship, because so many of our answers are dependent upon the complex systems that are part of the stories, and you know, we know that what's recyclable here might not be recyclable there, but there's is it more important to get the answer right or to understand the why? you know, or what limits us from making something recyclable. Even if it is recyclable, but it's not recycled, misinformation is a problem. So yeah, good debate starting points.
I sat in on the recycling presentation yesterday that the Cascades group did, and there were so many questions about why isn't this recyclable? Why is that recyclable? And it was that. And one of the things he had on his last slides was it's important when you're bringing this back to students is to be honest about the complexity of the systems and not just, you know, give the true answers. And we apply that as well in our lessons, is not just making everything seem nice and like we take a positive approach, but very honest and fact-based as well. Yeah.
Yes, and the kids, they are amazing how they are very eager to learn, and they are like, why is not, but why the machine doesn't get the black plastic? So it's important for them to see it and have access to the tools that they can help them in the future. So one of the students said, yeah, now I will teach my mom how to do it and use the website. So it's important for us to actually send a message like, you can have, there are some tools over there that we can have access, at least for us to understand how the systems work. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting for the Waste Wizard. Some classrooms, the kids all know about it, and some they have never heard of it before. So it's really important. Yeah.
Just related to this, like, you know, the dangers of positioning questions as right or wrong answers, you know, like, hey, I got it right, I don't have to think about this anymore, I know things, versus the, you know, it depends kind of framing. I think, you know, if an answer surprises you, or there's not one clear answer, that's what do you mean? There's curiosity there, and so yeah, it's a cool stuff to explore.
Yeah, and we didn't mention it in the presentation, but of course, if they get their hypothesis wrong, we actually explain like why that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing, because now you can ask a new question and you can change that. Yeah. Actually, Rafaela, there was a question about, I think, the research survey in the chat.
Oh, where can I read about the answers to your children's survey? So we haven't applied yet. We are in a pilot. So because everything that's happened this year, we were not able to do it. We have all the permits from TDSB and the university, all the ethicals protocol in place, but we will do it like properly next school year. But I have the questionnaire if you are interested to see the questions. Yes, I can send that to you.
Do you get any examples of children reacting very strongly and saying, well, I'm going to stop using plastic drinking straws, I'm going to stop using plastic bags?
So yeah, every lesson we ask something that they didn't know before, and at the end, and then we ask, what can we do to change small habits? Because that's the thing for us, it's about waste is not, we don't want to shame anyone. So everything that they do, it's good, and we can improve from there. For example, we have a trivia question about what can we do to reduce, what can we do for a birthday party to reduce waste? So we have some examples, and then we said balloons, one of the options. We reusable cutlery, reusable other things, reusable decorations, and cut the balloons off. And one of the kids at the end, what you are going to do for change, he said, I will never use a balloon anymore. So it's interesting because they understand the situation and they want to do to change. And what we are always saying, like, you don't need to change everything, it's impossible, but you can make small changes every day in your life, and it's important to give them the tools to know how to do it. Yeah.
So if I can jump in, that's I mean, that's officially our time. I don't think it's quite as critical as the other workshops because there aren't any more, except for the big wrap up of the conference and the presentation of the Ecom Awards of Excellence. And I'd encourage you all to attend that. Otherwise, once again, thank you very, very much, Susan and Rafaela, for your presentation. I found it personally quite interesting. It's an interest of mine. Just wanted to mention briefly if it would be at all useful for your programs. Well, two things. There was a young man here who did a science fair project and found all sorts of microplastics in our Yukon River, which was eye-opening. He went to the national on that a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And I also have a plastic song that you might be interested in hearing sometime. So
Absolutely.
okay, I'll send you an email on that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jason, anything else to say?
No, I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you.